Hello, welcome to Cheyenne's Forum. Today is May 27th, the Memorial Day. Here, welcome our dear friend Tom. Tom, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. It's been 2 weeks since our last talk, and today is Memorial Day. So you want to say something for the Memorial weekend?
I'd like to honor all of the families of all of the military figures who died keeping our country free all these years. And interesting, the holiday used to be called Decoration Day after the Civil War, that people would go to the graves of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed in the Civil War back in the 1860s and put flowers or decorations, excuse me, on the gravestones. And
Oh,
then later, the holiday, the name kind of changed into Memorial Day. And then in the 1960s, the law was passed where it created holidays, most of the holidays to be on the Monday of the week of that holiday. Now, Christmas is still on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, and Thanksgiving, but many of the other holidays were moved to be on a Monday to give people 3-day weekends.
mm,
That law, which I think was 1967, is where the name was officially changed to Memorial Day.
nice. Well, thank you for the knowledge. Yeah, never heard about that, but it's good to know. Yes, I just saw a picture yesterday, an American flag and some field heroes, and then the word said some gives everybody gives some, but some give all.
Right.
It really touches, and it's really have us to rethink how our freedom comes from, where our freedom comes from. And then for today's topic, we have two. One topic is about the Mar-a-Lago. Remember 2022, FBI just get into the Mar-a-Lago. But last week, we have a reporter. Her name is Julie. She actually reported that they found the documentation from FBI that allowed the deadly force to get into the Mar-a-Lago to search the document, which is it's a big issue, and everybody's just like, "What happened? Are they want to kill Trump and his family?" And then 3 days later, White House come out actually DOJ come out and explain that this is just a standard procedure. Even they search the document at Biden's house, they still use that called deadly force. So what's really happened? You're from FBI, so you know that very clearly, right?
Yes, and I had been a member of the SWAT team in Chicago. Later, as an assistant in charge of the San Francisco division, I ran the SWAT program there. I was also one of the SWAT commanders at the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996. So I'm very familiar with the rules of engagement concerning what SWAT teams do. Now, from what I've read about what she wrote, in a way, it's much ado about nothing. The issue with the Mar-a-Lago is not what the orders were to the SWAT team. It was the fact that they even used a SWAT team. Trump
Uh,
had been cooperative. He had allowed FBI agents and other officials from the records keeping to come in there and look at what he had and where he had placed the documents and all of that. And he was
mhm,
under no real obligation to do that,
right.
but he did it and was cooperating, and they had agreements in place of how the documents would be reviewed. And
Mhm,
all of a sudden the FBI decides to deploy a SWAT team, and that decision came right from Merrick Garland to
right.
send the SWAT team from Washington field office down to Florida to execute that. Now, that was, in my opinion, the horrible mistake, because Trump had been totally cooperative. At no time did he try to obstruct anybody from coming in, including
Right.
FBI, uh, including the archives people, to come
Mhm,
in. And they had come in. They had seen how he had the documents stored. In one case, they told him, put a lock on that door, which he did. So
mhm,
all of a sudden, to have a SWAT team deployed And this is part of, I think, the terrible legacy of Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray sending SWAT teams in to do things that normally a handful of FBI agents in normal business clothing would have done this. This includes the SWAT team going to arrest Roger Stone at his home and having boats and planes and agents in full military gear with long weaponry. The only time that's justified to even send a SWAT team if there's an indication that there could be a very dangerous situation and the agents could be outgunned, literally. And so once the decision is made to send the SWAT team, then there are all these rules that kick in automatically when you deploy a SWAT team. For example, because if you're using tear gas grenades, the gas is put in the air by a small fire in the canister. Therefore, you risk burning a building down. So anytime a SWAT team is deployed, the fact that they might use tear gas, it's misnomer tear gas. It's actually smoke that carries little pellets in the air. So it's not really a gas. It's a solid irritant. But the fact that fire is so possible, then the FBI has to bring the fire department. They have to be nearby. The fact that there's a possibility of serious injury to either the FBI or the occupants of the facility that they're searching, then they have to make sure they know, and it's in the orders that each agent is given, where the nearest hospital or medical center is. Now, when I was in the SWAT program in Chicago and later ran the SWAT program in San Francisco, we usually took volunteer doctors and nurses with us, emergency room doctors, so that if we're up in the mountains somewhere, like in California, Napa Valley or somewhere, we're a long way from medical care. So we had doctors with us, and also each SWAT team, which usually has between 8 and 10 agents, sends a member to become an emergency medical technician, which I was. When I was on the SWAT team in Chicago, I got sent with a handful of other SWAT team members from our team to Michael Reese Hospital on the south side of Chicago, which was and you see Chicago, it's still a shooting gallery. So if you're working out of that emergency room, which we did, working with the doctors and nurses, you saw multiple gunshot wounds, stabbing wounds, people getting hit with bricks, you name it. And we learned to treat those. So if that happened to one of our agents in a remote area, we would have an idea of how to treat it, and we would have basic equipment. Now, the difference between an emergency medical technician and a paramedic is paramedics are also authorized under doctor's orders from the hospital emergency room. They're also authorized to administer, various whatever medications or other items like that, which EMTs are not. But treat sucking chest wounds or bad bleeding or gunshots or stabbings, then we were trained and gained experience. And during that training, we had to spend many hours on an ambulance going to the sites where something occurred. So we're seeing the victims even before they get to the emergency room. So that was very common. So to have medical teams accompany the SWAT team, that's very, common. Now, going to Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach, Florida, you can be sure that there are numerous adequate medical facilities very nearby. Right. So it's not the same issue as going into the wilderness to pursue a fugitive or something and not having any medical care except for what you bring with you. Sure. So some of the other issue about deadly force, they're authorized to use their weapons and shoot somebody and kill somebody. The authorization for the use of deadly force, which in hundreds of lawsuits over the years has been specified by the U.S. Supreme Court. The rules of engagement apply to every federal officer, every state officer, every county, every city, everybody that's a sworn police officer that has a weapon and may use it in the duties that they're doing. That authorization is the same. whether it's federal, state, or local or city police, it's the same rules of engagement. If you're defending your own life, that's obvious. If you're, trying to defend somebody else's life, which is what differs from a civilian, let's say, a good Samaritan, you see somebody being attacked, you go over and intervene and use your weapon in the process of it. Those rules of engagement apply to all law enforcement officers at every level. They're not specified. Oh, in this case, it's the president's documents. You can go in and shoot somebody if you want to. It's not discretionary. Now, if those agents conducting the raid at Mar-a-Lago get attacked, then they can use the same rules as whether they were conducting a drug raid somewhere else. The rules of engagement apply. And all of the shootings where a law enforcement officer takes the life of a non-law enforcement officer, those are all heavily reviewed, often resulting in lawsuits, litigation, investigation. So in most shooting cases, if it's a state police officer or a city officer, then the incident gets investigated not by that agency, but by another agency. And oftentimes the FBI investigates shootings at all the other levels, except if it involves FBI. Then that's done separately to protect the FBI so that it's not biased. But the idea, there's an expression that we used to use when I was on inspection division. It's all how you write the truth. So the rules of engagement, you can make it sound like those agents were ordered to go in there and shoot at will and kill anybody they want, whatever. No. They're under the same rules of engagement, whether they were conducting a raid on a private house or a private business or the president's house. Those rules, mainly revolving around self-defense, apply in all situations. You don't get special authority. Well, in this case, this is special. You can shoot somebody. No. That's not true.
Sure.
Now, it can sound like that, but the mistake with Mar-a-Lago, in my view, they had no business sending a SWAT team down there.
Sure.
Trump had been totally cooperative. He'd already allowed the archives people to come in, and he'd already had agents in, and he made it clear. Call me, we'll let you in, we'll notify security, which in that case was Secret Service.
Sure.
So you would not want a possibility. There's reporting that they were going to immediately break down the exterior doors or whatever and get in and not tell the Secret Service they were coming. Now, I have a hard time believing that would be true, because oftentimes when we did a SWAT raid on a house, we would make very sure there was going to be no other law enforcement that we would conflict with. And that deconfliction, it didn't matter if we were going into a location of drug dealers or kidnappers or terrorists or what. We wanted to be sure that there are going to be no other law enforcement or armed guards in there that would pose a threat to the agents going into the facility. So I think there's much ado about nothing in what's been said about that raid and what would go on. So I have to believe that the agent running the raid, which I believe was the special agent in charge from the Washington field office, that they sent the team down from Washington instead of using a local Miami SWAT team to go in there. And in that situation, they would take a great deal of care to let the Secret Service assigned to protect Trump that they're coming. Now, even if it's short notice, they would at least tell them the FBI is coming and they're carrying guns. Now, nobody would have had to tell those Secret Service agents or private security guards, if they hired them, that they should show up in full SWAT military gear and long weapons. And the SWAT teams from FBI have done this in several situations during the Biden administration, during Merrick Garland's term as Attorney General, Christopher Wray's term as Director of the FBI. You haven't seen those SWAT teams deployed to arrest Democrats or liberals.
Right.
It seems to be a one way. And again, people have referred to it as two-tier justice or lawfare or
Right.
bias against anybody that's a patriot or conservative or however they label themselves. And I think that that's the situation here. But getting, the reporter getting her hands on documents specifying the rules of engagement, having heard those rules, those are standard for
Sure.
any SWAT operation. So
Sure.
my question isn't that they issued those orders, because that's standard. Garden
Right.
variety, SWAT 101. My
So,
argument with that is that they sent a SWAT team in the first place.
right. Right. Well, thank you so much for explaining the whole situation. And then it seems like Garland misleading people to believe that the dead force is a standard procedure, which is partially true. But the key is why you sent a SWAT team to Trump's. So that's the thing. It seems to me that they are against some standard procedure of when and how to operate the SWAT team. So, do you have any requirement that allow people send the SWAT team? May Garland against the rule to send the SWAT team under this situation, which you mentioned that Trump is totally cooperating with them.
Right. I don't think it's illegal that Garland did that. I
Mhm.
just think it's stupid because of the possibility of violence happening and somebody get hurt when you have that many people with that many guns in a highly charged emotional situation. The fact that they deployed the SWAT team elevated the emotions of the situation, elevated the stress level for all of the members of the SWAT team and for the people in the house.
Mhm.
Now, it turns out Trump wasn't there, and we don't know, he was somewhere else that day, but
Mhm.
he could have been there.
Right.
Uh, Family members could have been there as they're rifling through Melania's underwear drawer. Those kind of things are so abusive and
Right.
so beyond the pale. And people like me that guard the reputation, and the whole time, 30 years I was in, guarded the reputation of the FBI
Mhm.
very, very strongly. We did not want to appear to be heavy handed or inappropriate or set up a situation where violence was likely. And in
Mhm.
this situation, it was more likely
Right.
than just coming with agents, handful of agents in civilian attire, coming to look at the documents or whatever it is. And the
Mhm.
other issue that I responded to this at the time on other cable news shows, that the picture of FBI documents with top secret covers on the file jackets being strewn around on the floor, I knew that was phony. I would
Mhm.
like to see the pictures taken of that room
Right.
before they threw the documents around. And,
Right.
and everybody that knows Trump knows that, number one, he's a germaphobe. He's very concerned about picking up germs, but he's also a neat freak, if you
Right.
will. He's
Mhm.
very obsessive, compulsive about all of the documents on the desks being neatly and properly stored and not thrown around. So when
Mhm.
I saw that, I knew they were setting up Trump for criticism. Oh, look how careless he is with top secret documents. First of
Not
all,
that kind of
the
person.
top of that folder that says top secret, we don't know what documents were in the folder. Now,
Right.
normally, the cover page, that cover, file jacket cover, the red
Mhm.
cover, would indicate top secret. And the documents within, even if there's 100 pages of documents and one page is top secret, then they all have to be for purposes of that document. And so, to look at that and say that he would have thrown those documents around, we don't even know if there was anything in below the file jacket. You
Mhm.
can't judge a book by the cover.
Right.
Well, in this case, you can't judge the document by the cover,
Mhm.
that it says top secret and all of that. Now, what happens is, as president, Trump has the sole authority to declassify. So
Right.
if that's top secret and he says, not anymore,
Mhm.
then it's not top secret anymore.
Mhm.
Even if the file jacket says that, that doesn't make it so. And so the fact that he had those documents transported from the White House to Mar-a-Lago
Mm-hmm.
at his orders. He declassified those documents, which is completely within his authority. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
the archives people want to argue you have to bring them back right away or whatever, well, maybe, but that's not, the archives people are not in charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Bill Clinton's stored classified material in his sock drawer at
Mm-hmm.
his home in New York after he was president. Obama took the documents that he took that he was legally entitled to take. I think he had them in a furniture store or something
Journals. Yeah, right.
outside of Chicago.
Right.
And so once they declassify them, nobody, it doesn't say, they're just like any other document. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no legal requirement. Oh, you've got to put them in a safe. Oh, you have to have them under armed guard. Not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not if the president declassifies them. Now
Mm-hmm.
you had Biden with all those hundreds of documents. At
Mm-hmm.
no time before he was elected president,
Mm-hmm.
during the time he was vice president, or during the time he was a senator, at no time did Biden have the authority to take those documents out of the Capitol or wherever he was looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
The only way that would have been, I said this at the time, by the way, I said, if they want to protect Biden, then Obama should immediately say, I declassified those documents and gave them to Joe, my
Right.
pal Joe, but I
Right.
declassified them. He
Right.
never did. So at no time did you hear that those documents were authorized by the President of the United States to
Mm-hmm.
be declassified, and then they could be taken and put in a box next to his Corvette or the other locations that he stored them in. So
Mm-hmm.
there's such a double standard and such hypocrisy when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Trump was completely cooperating with the National Archives people
Mm-hmm.
when they visited Mar-a-Lago.
Mm-hmm.
When they said put a lock on that door, he did it.
Right.
And so they could be in a discussion of whether Trump wants to return those or not. It's up to him. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Biden, you have during the investigation by her, special prosecutor Her, Biden admits that he provided classified material from those documents. And again, he had no right to declassify them. So he used those to make millions of dollars on a book deal and provided the classified information to an author. He had
Right.
no authority to do that. And then you have her saying, well, we can't prosecute him because he doesn't have any memory anymore. He's mentally deficient. He's all of that. Hey, pal, he's the president of the United States. He's got his finger on the nuclear button.
Right.
Nobody says anything about him being deficient there, but you're
Mm-hmm.
saying you can't prosecute him because he might not remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not how it works, or that's not how it's supposed to work.
Sure.
So that's the difference in this case. If you have Clinton and excuse me, other ex-presidents take documents, they declassified, they had the authority to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Biden, the one guy who did not have authority to take them, and then actually provides classified material to a book author so he can make millions of dollars. So he wasn't doing this for the greater good of the world or, for peace in our time. None of that. He's going to make, like he does in most of his transactions, how many $1 million can I make on this deal? And Biden has shown he'll do anything for money, legal or not. And in
Yeah.
that case, it was not legal. He did it anyway. And here they are at Trump's residence. He's barely out of office a couple of years, and already they're deciding what he needs to return, what he didn't have a right to classify, any of that, which is none of that is true. He had the right to declassify every document he had and to be in possession of them himself.
So the whole thing seems they're so lawless. They're just like a dictatorship what
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
doing right now. And so talk about the trial. Tomorrow, I think is a big day. The New York trial will have to come out. And what's your predict of the come out? And also, Biden had already planned to give a speech after the outcome. So some people just worry that they will convert Trump and then some chaos will happen. So what your thought about that?
Well,
or
first
tomorrow?
of all, on the schedule, tomorrow, and if necessary, the next day, both sides get to make their closing arguments. That's
Right.
also referred to as summations. So you'll
Mm-hmm.
have the prosecutors be able to give a summation of all the evidence they presented and what that proves, what
Mm-hmm.
laws were violated, and how they have the proof that Trump did it. And then the defense will have their summation of, no, it's not true. And they have not sufficiently proven anything beyond a reasonable doubt, a requirement for a criminal prosecution. So
Mm-hmm.
that, they're saying those arguments may be finished tomorrow and or the part into the next day. And then the judge is going to issue instructions to the jury. And this is going to be highly contentious and
Mm-hmm.
subject to review and subject to appeal what
Mm-hmm.
instructions he provides. And then the jury will deliberate, and they could decide in a couple hours or a couple months. We don't know, but it'll go to the jury.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most legal scholars are predicting that the jury has been set up to be so biased against Trump that they will probably convict him no matter what, no matter how little evidence, no matter
Right.
how little of the case has been proven, or how many mistakes the prosecutors made.
Mm-hmm.
All of that the jury may say, we don't care, it's Trump, he's guilty.
Right.
Simple, he's guilty. That's it.
Mm-hmm. So if
And
that
that may
happens,
happen.
mm-hmm. So after that, what's your prediction of what's going to happen after they convicted Trump?
Well, they may remand Trump to go to Rikers Island, the state jail or the city jail in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And the predictions are that if it even goes that far, he'll have another situation like the picture he posed for when he was booked in Georgia, that
Mm-hmm.
they would book him again, and that whatever bail is set, that he would be allowed to post bail pending, the sentencing. We don't know, and this Merchan, the judge, has been so biased.
Right.
Uh, I think anything's possible. He may try to lock up Trump. We'll see.
If
But
he decide to lock up Trump, what do you think about the reaction of people?
I think the reaction of the members of the jury will be they'll celebrate. But that's 12 people out of 350 million in the country. I think the majority of people, even independents, are going to look at this and say, this is beyond the pale. We'd never dreamed this
Mm-hmm.
kind of justice would be administered in the United States,
Right.
especially to an ex-president. So
Mm-hmm.
Merchan, there are so many reasons that Merchan, the Supreme Court could overturn any of this. For example, Merchan's daughter making money and consulting to a number of Democrats and
Right.
contributing money back to the Democratic Party. So just all of this, Merchan should have been recused to not sit and hear this case. I think the problem is in New York, they'd be hard pressed to find anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be hard pressed to find a janitor that wasn't a Democrat that hates Trump. So that's where the problem's going to be, is what's going to happen, what kind of instructions he gives. Now, the judge in this case, so many things that happened that could be overturned
Mm-hmm.
as prejudicial in the way he conducted the trial. For instance, the testimony of Stormy Daniels, that went way beyond, whether she had sex with Trump, and if she did, what kind, let's say, what kind that may have been. That's not relevant to Trump giving money
Right.
to affect the election at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And the fact that you have people testified that what Trump did in giving money to Cohen to try to, solve this thing was basically to avoid the embarrassment
Mm-hmm.
of his wife at the time or family members or others.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't make it illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had the election commissions already reviewed this case that now it's not worth it. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New York had reviewed it. No, no
Mhm.
violations. You have Alvin Bragg basically making beef stew out of rotten meat.
Mhm.
And that's what's happened. He decides he's going to take statutes that don't apply, that
Mhm.
are federal and don't belong in
Mhm.
local court. They bring in one of the top prosecutors from DOJ and have
Mhm.
him sit in with the locals to help,
Mhm.
help get Trump. Everything about this is get Trump. And I think that, the other factor is it's only going to take one of the jurors to say, I'm not voting guilty.
Right.
Whichever one of them maybe has, a conscience, maybe decides he'll go against peer group pressure and everything else and say, and the fear that of retribution after the fact. Because
Mhm.
remember, these jurors are not sequestered, they're not secret identity like in organized crime trials. And
Mhm.
so therefore, everybody's going to know if the conviction is given, then that
Mhm.
takes 12 unanimous jurors. And if
Mhm.
that happens, everybody will know. If there's one juror that holds out and they end up with a hung jury,
Mhm.
then that juror may not want to do that because they may be in fear of their own life if
Right.
they go against New York's narrative that Trump has to be convicted.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to me, it's a dangerous situation of what the juror might do.
Right. Right. You never know that what the outcome is.
Right.
Yeah. And some people just worry about the military action. If Trump was convicted and people are angry, and Biden administration might use the military force, is that possible or is that
Well, Joe
legal?
Biden is the commander in chief. So
Yeah.
they've already authorized the FBI to go way beyond what I
Hmm.
think is lawful and necessary in
Sure.
executing a number of operations, a number of arrests of
Sure.
Republicans or conservatives or advisors to Trump
Hmm.
or pro life or whatever it might be. When
Hmm.
they've gone after them, it's anything's possible, no holds barred. Now, Biden is commander in chief. And
Hmm.
right now, we have a very woke military,
Right.
very liberal, and that's why they can't maintain their quotas.
Hmm.
Good people that want to be, good soldiers and make a career of life in the military don't want to join
Hmm.
because they don't want to be passed over by LBGTQ people who are less qualified, but they fit the narrative. You know, they fit one of those letters.
Hmm.
And therefore, you could be Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier in World War II, but in the current military, he wouldn't have a chance to do
Hmm.
the heroic things that he did in World War II. So I
Hmm.
think that's why you have a lot of people dropping out or not joining in the first place, and they can't maintain the quota.
Hmm. So that means the military action is not really looks like going to happen, right?
I don't think so, but it could. I mean, he's commander in chief.
Right,
You
right, right.
remember when Trump said during the BLM riots that when they were destroying buildings, including the church next to the White House, that he was going to call out the military. And
Hmm.
you had at the time the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, saying, "We're not going to do it. I don't care
Hmm.
what the president says. They're going to
Right.
be in support. They were going to violate the law and
Hmm.
ignore the president's orders." So
Hmm.
that's the problem here is that Biden, who knows who's really in charge? Is it Obama? Is it somebody else behind the scenes,
Hmm.
using, Biden as a marionette to give these
Right,
speeches? And it's
right.
not really Biden making the decision, it's somebody else doing it.
Sure.
So, yeah, you could have Biden issue the orders as commander in chief. Okay, Army, what are they going to do? If Trump gets found guilty,
Hmm.
um, and the judge orders him sent to Rikers Island
Hmm.
until he can post bond or be processed or whatever, then military is not going to stop that. Now, if
Right.
Trump's acquitted and walks out the door a free man, then who knows what, if Biden wants the military to do something, then it would
Right.
be illegal.
Right. So it's a very, just like you said, very dangerous situation. It's tomorrow or Wednesday, right? Maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday.
Maybe
We'll
tomorrow, depends how quick the summations are. Each side gets to tell their final
right, right,
story.
right.
And so it could go to the jury tomorrow night or Wednesday sometimes. The prediction is that if they go into Wednesday, the summations will be over
Mhm.
halfway through Wednesday. So by Wednesday night, you could have this go to a jury.
Sure, sure. So this is in American, so we'll see what's going to happen in a few days. And in Taiwan, you know that there are something happened there. The new president just sworn in the office, and then you see the Chinese military has a big action, military action around Taiwan. So what do you think about this situation? What's going to happen? Or this is just a threat and not will not turning to a real war to Taiwan.
My personal opinion,
Mhm,
and listening to some of the experts on the topic, I think China's bluffing. And this
mhm,
whole thing is, flexing their muscles and showing how strong they are. But there's been other reporting come out that I've read about that
mhm,
much of the aspects of the Chinese military is that they're not really that good. They're not combat tested, except
mhm,
the border, incursion by the Indians,
mhm,
things like that. Just like the U.S. military, our
mhm,
military has gone into weak countries that don't have a strong military, that don't have a strong air force or navy, and whoa, we showed them, whether it's Iraq or you name it.
mhm,
But I think that some of the reporting I've read, for instance, China has developed a new aircraft carrier that
mhm,
apparently they're having all kinds of trouble with it technically. And then
mhm,
they have new jets. They stole our technology
mhm,
for fighter jets, but then they didn't steal enough apparently because they're having trouble with these jets actually operating. So
mhm,
you have a number of aspects of Chinese military uh, showing that they're weaker than they're believed to be. And the
mhm,
other problem for the Chinese, let's say the Navy, for example, is that Taiwan basically blocks China from sending their warships out into the blue ocean. So
mhm,
they're more like a glorified Coast Guard.
mhm,
And so a lot of people say that they're not really up to being able to pull off an invasion, even if they think they are, they say they want to or whatever.
mhm,
So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Now, the other theories going on is that the Chinese and other governments recognize that Biden is so weak
mhm,
that our claims that we're going to protect Taiwan or we're giving them military equipment and we're doing this and doing that, that they think that, Biden is a paper tiger. He's
mhm,
not even a tiger, he's a paper.
mhm.
And, and therefore, I think China has no real fear of the Biden administration.
Right.
However, they're looking at this and China also, by the way, has to protect its own economy. Now,
Mhm,
China relies heavily on the chips manufactured in Taiwan,
mhm,
and their technology or their engineers have not been able to duplicate
mhm.
the ability of those chips.
The
So they
chips.
can operate, those chips can operate a small appliance or a washing machine or a toaster or
Mhm.
something like that. But to rely on those for your military aircraft or military ships, um,
Right.
they're saying they can't, and they can't manufacture the equivalent chips. So
Mhm,
that's the other issue is right now they look like they can get all the chips they need and they're doing fine. So I
mhm,
think that much of what China is doing is trying to bluff the United States that they have a superior military and they have that. And the more woke the
mhm,
American military becomes, woke is a very close word to weak. And
mhm,
so they will look at the weakness in the United States military capability. No
mhm,
matter what Rachel Levine says, our military is not ready for that kind of war.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, since we have 2 weeks have not doing our interview, there's so many things happen in the world. Uh about Iran president. dead in the crash. So what's your reaction? It is a accident or it is more than an accident? What do you think?
Don't know. I don't think we have the evidence to say it was deliberate sabotage or not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a regular accident. Why are
Okay.
they flying the helicopter in such bad weather and all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I think that there might be no way to ever know. Just
Sure.
guess.
Sure.
Uh,
So what do you think the situation in that region will change because the president have that? Do you
I,
think it will change a lot or not really?
I think for now, not really.
Okay. Because the president does not have the real power or some other reason?
Well, partly that's true. The real Ayatollah running Iran and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That the president is like the administrative head of the government, but he's not really the policy decider. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the reign of tyranny in Iran over its own citizens, um, I think the average citizen there goes, this may help. Whoever replaces this guy might be worse,
Mm-hmm.
more oppressive, more tyrannical.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that they're really celebrating this yet. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
wait and see what exactly happens with the real leadership in Iran that still controls the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have so lots of people to say hi to you. And one audience said, I'm sure that they will find Trump guilty for the trial. And then the other audience said, um, only Trump win, American will have the hope. So let me see what else. Oh, and then the other audience just say hi to you. So yeah, these friends said that he or she is sure that Trump will be found guilty in the trial. So that maybe will cause a lot of chaos. There are so many people, so many Trump supporters are looking at that. So I don't know
Yeah,
if another January 6th will happen or another lots of people get together and something like that will happen.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think, what the government has done in the January 6th case, and
Mhm.
again, using the FBI to determine everybody that was even remotely supportive, not even if they were at the Capitol, being
Right.
arrested and sentenced to jail. Again, the original kangaroo courts in Washington,
Mhm.
as much as New York, are the January 6th prosecutions.
Right.
Foregone conclusions that these guys are going to get years and years for what
Mhm.
amounts to trespassing.
Mhm.
And and I think that that could go on. But the real problem here, I think, with the government and tyranny created by the government is they've created a system where if you went against the vaccines, for example, you criticized the doctors or the authorities, and they used everything in the world to go after people that did that, whether they were doctors, to get them thrown out or get them deplatformed or whatever it was. And the message was clear that if the authorities say you're going to be locked down, no matter how stupid it is, you're going to be locked down. Or
Mhm.
wear a mask, even though it's ineffective, you're going to wear a mask. You're going to
Right.
do what we tell you to do, or else. And I
Mhm.
think that in the case of January 6th, the message was to the 1,200 people that have been identified and now arrested by the FBI in January 6th cases is we don't care what you did. We
Mhm.
don't care if you went in the Capitol. We don't
Mhm.
care if you stayed outside the Capitol. We don't care if you were in another city. You were on the phone or exchanging email messages with other people who were going to go to the Capitol or actually may have gone to the Capitol. And therefore, we're going to get you and we're going to destroy your life, your
Mhm.
livelihood. You're going to go to jail maybe here in
Mm-hmm.
Washington, and then they've spread the prisoners all around.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other issue with January 6th and with COVID is it's the opportunity for the government to send you, the citizen, a message. Don't even think about protesting.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even think about speaking up
Mm-hmm.
against the vaccine or against the medicines or the
Right.
policies. So that's kind of been the lesson of during the Biden administration is you will obey.
Mm-hmm.
You'll shut up
Right.
and obey
Mm-hmm.
and comply.
Mm-hmm.
And you have millions of people that go, well, I better comply. I guess I better go along with this. And so that's going to be interesting when people say, oh, we could have a civil war. We could have a revolution. We could have all of these events happen depending on what happens to Trump or some of his allies. And I don't know. How fearful is the public? And in other words, too, if you're going to organize a real insurrection,
Mm-hmm.
you want your state to secede from the union, like some people in Texas have talked about, or you want, other issues like that, then you're taking the risk of your life being turned upside down by the government.
Right.
Are you going to do it? The message from the government is better not.
Mm-hmm.
You better not defy us.
Mm-hmm.
You better comply,
Mm-hmm.
period. If you don't comply, we'll get you. And so far, 1,200 people, they've gotten them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you hear misinformation. Officer Skiknik, who died of natural causes, you
Right.
have Bill Maher being interviewed. I think it was Megyn Kelly last week. And
Mm-hmm.
Maher is saying he was murdered. His death was a murder. And she's saying, nobody, only one person was murdered on
Mm-hmm.
January 6th, Ashley Babbitt. And
Mm-hmm.
that was by a police officer who had
Right.
no business shooting her, but
Right.
no investigation of him, no, outcry about her being murdered. Instead, they come up with this police officer who 2 or 3 days later has a stroke. He was murdered,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't. And so you have this someone like Bill Maher with an international audience. Millions of people watch his HBO show, and yet he's putting out false information like that. Typical of the left. Just put out anything, no matter if it's untrue. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a great deal of difficulty for people to actually speak the truth
Mm-hmm.
in these interviews, whether it's on cable or even independently. And they've used Google and YouTube and these platforms to silence people, even on the internet, to
Right.
try to censor people through them. So now you have Trump's channel, Truth Social, Elon Musk, Twitter, now X. So you have some platforms where people are trying to get their message out,
Mm-hmm.
but they're trying to suppress it at every level. And
Mm-hmm.
because they've been so successful at suppressing it, I don't think any major insurrection or civil war or anything is going to happen, at least not yet.
Mm-hmm. So people said we will, if Biden got the second term, we will have a civil war. Um, to my point of view is we already in the civil war, and the people are losing. This is a very sad reality, just
I
like
agree. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So the situation is really like the independent war, like 200 plus years ago. The American people faced the threat from the British government, and now from our own government. So I'm just thought about one word from Shakespeare: to be or not to be. It's a question.
Yeah, the
So what?
difference 250 years ago, at the time of the revolution, at the time that Americans were starting to decide we need to break away from England, we need to be independent.
Mhm.
Well, the government did not, the British in this case, they didn't have telephones, they didn't
Right.
have internet, they didn't have emails. So they had no ability to conduct electronic surveillance
Mhm.
on George Washington or Patrick Henry or
So
the
they
other
have
members that later
ability to
became,
organize. Right.
yeah. But now you can't communicate in any way, shape, or form that they can't copy and can't monitor. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that was the message of Edward Snowden when he
Mm-hmm.
revealed what NSA was doing to American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that did not exist 250 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, the armaments at the time of the Revolutionary War, which went on for several years, people think that in 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was written and signed, that was it. We became a free country. No, no, no. We had many years. It wasn't until I think 1789 that the
Mm-hmm.
final Constitution was ratified. So you have a whole different situation at the time. You have the Declaration being issued, proclamation being issued, and it was not the same as now. And then in terms of weaponry, it's not like the British had jet aircraft and the colonies did not. The
Mm-hmm.
British had warships, but they couldn't go inland, so they're sitting off the coast, or they could blockade New York or other harbors. But that wasn't enough to overcome what the colonists did more inland. The You look at all of the technology of warfare today.
Mm-hmm.
The colonies had no equivalent to the
Right.
British, but it wasn't enough of a difference. British had muskets, the colonies had muskets. The
Right.
British had cannon, the colonists had cannon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like one side had nuclear bombs and the other side had hand grenades. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why, in that case, there was a greater ability for the colonies to overcome the
Mm-hmm.
British Army
Mm-hmm.
then than it would be the case now of independence seeking or insurrectionists in the United States overcoming the U.S. military. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it's not even in the same ballpark anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True. True. So do we have hope? We are the majority.
The hope, well, the majority doesn't matter. That's not the issue. Go back to 1917. The
Mm-hmm.
Bolsheviks that overthrew the czars in Russia and took
Mm-hmm.
over Lenin,
Right.
Trotsky and Stalin, they
Mm-hmm.
were a minority. The Bolsheviks in Russia were a very
Majority.
small minority, and the
Right. Right.
majority supported the czar and were
Right.
typical Russians at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Lenin and company were a small group didn't matter. That was enough. If you have a small group of dedicated revolutionaries, they can overcome a silent majority not paying attention or not caring to fight.
Mm-hmm. So if in order to win or in order to not lose, we need to have a small group of people who is really dedicated to the freedom, the real freedom of people. Do you
Yeah, and I
believe?
think I think that would, the so-called silent majority will be silent no more. I think that could happen or would happen if this goes far enough. Now,
Mhm.
friends of mine are saying, well, they think it's gone too far already. We're going to have civil war right now, or revolution right now, or states seceding or removing themselves from the union. And I've said, not yet. It's not bad enough yet for the average citizen. And I think that as bad as it is, as bad as inflation is, as bad as it is, and also the ability of the government with Biden to go to the pulpit and just lie.
Mhm.
You had Biden last week make the statement that at the time they took over, inflation was 9% and from Trump. No, inflation was less than 2%
Mhm.
when they took over. They've
Right.
taken it beyond 9% on their own. And
Mhm.
so, but to tell that lie, well, things aren't that bad. They were bad under Trump. No, they
Mhm.
weren't. He
Mhm.
constantly in these speeches lately has made the statement that the Trump economy was terrible. They inherited that. Everything that Trump was doing was wrong. They inherited that. That's not true.
They
You
made
know,
history. They made a wrong history.
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see for the coming few days what's going to happen for the trial. And after that, we'll still let's discuss the aftermath. But I feel like I feel I don't know. It's really hard to say because I do do trust your judgment, and I do agree with you that the silent majority is under a huge attack, and it's really hard to take it back if we do not have a red wave this coming election. We're pretty much done.
True.
All right, so still we have 6 months for to the November. We still have some time, so we can still fight before the November election come.
That's true.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
And
Tom.
also, if I could add to that,
Sure.
is that right now we're looking at this that it's Biden and Kamala Harris versus Trump and some other vice president.
Hmm.
The But we don't know. You hear all of these Democratic pundits saying that before the convention or right at the convention in Chicago,
Hmm.
um, that Biden may say, I'm not running and pick a different person to be presidential candidate. And now you're talking about, the Democrats, Chicago's my hometown. It
Hmm.
makes me very sad to see these people. Democrats ruled Chicago over the years, but not enough to ruin it. But to see what they've done to that great city today, just like you see in New York to that great city today. But
Hmm.
with regard to Chicago, they're talking about now of maybe having a remote convention because they're afraid of the violence that's going to happen at the Democratic convention in Chicago. Much
Really?
like I was in high school in 1968, I was a senior in high school going into my senior year when you had the riots in Chicago at the convention in 68. And and that really hurt the Democratic Party. So if they have riots, what the Democratic leaders are saying right now behind closed doors is, maybe we better call this convention off and do it by Zoom. So if they do that, that would be number one, an admission that they can't control
Hmm.
anything.
Hmm.
But secondly, it would just be an ineffective method, just like Zoom. For you and I to communicate by Zoom, no problem.
Hmm.
But to try to communicate with 20,000 members of the Democratic Party that are supposed to be in the room and chanting and singing and dancing and all of that, that cannot be duplicated on
No,
Zoom.
no.
And therefore, it would be less effective at persuading
Hmm.
independent voters or lazy voters, come
Hmm.
on out and vote. We need you. I think you won't be able to have an effective message to persuade people to do that if they're not in the hall, if they're not in the room. Uh,
Right.
Not to
Well,
mention the economic damage to the city of Chicago. Think of
mm-hmm.
all the rooms that are currently reserved. Think of
Mm-hmm.
all of the businesses and food caterers and everything else that's involved in putting on the convention and the airfare, all the people that have to fly in to Chicago for that event. And
Mm-hmm.
to suddenly do it remotely, I think that would be a fatal nail in the coffin of the Democratic Party.
Right. So just we'll see what's gonna happen.
Right.
Right. Well, thank you so much again. And thanks. And yeah, we have some audience and say hi and thank you so much, guys, to stick with us. And I'll do the Chinese version later today.
Okay.
Again,
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate it.
thank you, Tom. Thank you. We'll see you
Thank you,
next.
Shan. See you
Sure.
later.
See you. Bye-bye.